This video contains brief discussions of sexual abuse, the abuse of animals, and police brutality. Viewer discretion is advised. The Outlast series is known for its incredible antagonists, its grotesque horror, and its mechanic of flight instead of fight. Players take on the role of various protagonists between games, armed only with a night vision camcorder and their will to survive. The series got off to an explosive start in 2013 with the release of Outlast and its quick integration into the horror Let's Play ecosystem on YouTube. Not only has the series remained relevant to this day, but it's maintained its success and popularity largely through the launch of the live service multiplayer smash hit, The Outlast Trials. A prequel to Outlast itself, The Outlast Trials offers players a chance to learn more about the Murkoff Corporation, their involvement with the CIA and world politics, and how their unethical experiments were involved in global events from around 1955 to 1970. One of the things that makes the Outlast series so gripping and compelling is its relationship with reality. Most of the lore of the world within the games has been married to real-life people, experiments, and theories, particularly where MK Ultra and the CIA are concerned. While I won't delve into that rabbit hole here, I do suggest researching the CIA's MK Ultra projects if you find this video interesting and the general game world and lore intriguing. Personally, the lore of the Outlast universe is my favorite aspect of the series, and the writing propping it all up is remarkable in today's gaming climate. Where in other Outlast games, players are left with little choice but to run from danger, Trials gives players, also known as reagents, the opportunity to create builds with perks and to equip themselves with utility tools known as rigs to take advantage of the environment and help them evade and outwit their opposition within each carefully curated trial environment. The biggest threats to the reagent's well-being aren't the wall rider this time around. Instead, it comes packaged as various people known as the prime assets. This leads us into the subject of this video analysis, the prime asset Sergeant Leland Coyle. Now, I'm not going to discuss the psychology of Coyle because I'm not a psychologist, and there are plenty of videos out there already talking about those elements of his character. Rather, I wanted to dissect the writing behind the character and how the writers have been able to create an incredibly popular antagonist that is beloved by a devoted fan base, despite his deplorable history and brutality. Further, this video hasn't been scripted with the intention of criticizing anyone who is a fan of the character and exists simply as a character analysis from a writer's standpoint. Players are first introduced to Coyle via their very first real trial in the game, Kill the Snitch. Set within a fabricated jailhouse, reagents are shuttled in and given the simple task of breaking into the jail, locating the snitch, and executing him. Upon reaching the security room, a grunt, or a member of the experimental population, bangs on the bars, searching for a way out. Storming down the cell block, trailed by coils of smoke and wreathed in arcing electricity, a stout policeman screams out, enraged about enforcing the laws of the jail. Wielding an overcharged stun baton, Sergeant Coyle brutalizes the grunt in front of the reagents, culminating in an explosive execution. He departs soon after and moves down to patrol the parking garage where players will encounter him very soon. And down there, he's been charged with preventing the players from reaching the snitch. In writing, like reality, first impressions are critical. From this interaction, we gather that Leland Coyle is violent, ruthless, and revels in violence even toward those supposedly under his charge. Rather than simply correct the grunt, he chooses to beat them to death. He is the king of the jailhouse, and he rules with an overcharged electrical iron fist. Within the hierarchy of prime assets and their dynamic relationships to the player characters, Coyle is meant to represent the stern, disciplinary patriarch who maintains the order of his house by any means necessary. It's also noteworthy that Coyle physically doesn't seem like much of a threat. His stature is average. In fact, when confronting Coyle, most reagents are actually larger than he is. And rather than dress in the traditional blue or gray uniform that most Americans would anticipate from a policeman, the same we see many mannequins within the set of the jail itself actually wearing, Coyle is dressed in an almost fetishized way, similarly to like a sexy policeman costume you might find in a Halloween store. From head to toe, he's dressed in sleek black leather. His face is shadowed by a policeman's cap, and his eyes are hidden behind the lenses of dark aviator sunglasses. The contrast in his character design comes from the complementary nature of the blue electricity surging along the cables woven across his torso, connected to the car battery strapped on his back that powers his stun baton, and the splash of orange and red light cast from the cigarettes that we see him chain smoking. If you saw Coyle from his left side, he would almost resemble a proper policeman, but this is where his design truly becomes remarkable. From a distance, he projects the association many have with the police, especially during this time period: order, safety, and public confidence. His rank is stitched onto his arm visibly, his badge is visible and easily seen, and his silhouette is unmistakable as a member of the law enforcement. This is one half of the larger picture of his character, and the second he turns around, the ugliness there is physically shown. The right side of Coyle's head and neck is heavily disfigured. The flesh is burnt and raised into these rolling roils of pustule like scars as a result of constant exposure to electricity on that side. Appropriately, his right arm, the one he uses to dish out his definition of justice, is burdened by the greatest number of the wires connecting the battery on his back to the stun baton in that clenched gloved fist. I could draw comparisons to previously established characters like Harvey Dent from the DC universe, especially given Dent's association with the law as well. But I think in Coyle's case, the visual representation of his character's corruption does not manifest itself in his personality as an alter ego. Rather, Coyle is a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, a man whose history paints him as a sadistic, brutal figure who wielded the power of his badge for his own purposes long before his time in the Outlast Trials. And it wasn't until his involvement with Murkoff that his true nature manifested through his visage and became obvious. Coyle was not corrupted or changed by Murkoff. He has always been this way. Between the almost fetishized uniform and his physical grotesqueness, it becomes obvious that Coyle is the perversion of a policeman, and he embodies everything one would expect from a corrupted cop: extreme violence, prejudice, and fear. Red Barrels has published comics detailing the origin stories of the Prime assets on their website, and I recommend reading them if you're interested in learning more for yourself. In the Outlast Trials Chapter 1, we learn about Coyle's history before his involvement with the Murkoff Corporation. Within, we find Murkoff has dispatched an agent, Clyde Perry, poor guy, to surveil Sergeant Leland Coyle in his hometown of Blackwell, Oklahoma, because he's demonstrated the qualities that they were searching for within prime asset candidates, most notably charisma. We learn that Coyle was sexually abused as a child and frequently abused animals, leading to military school. He was a delinquent as a teenager, but those tendencies were stamped out by his recruitment into the local Ku Klux Klan chapter. That's a red flag. He was married at 19, and his wife died 6 months later by, quote, falling down the stairs. To avoid investigation, Coyle joined the Marine Corps, and he served 2 years in the Pacific Theater with 3 confirmed enemy kills and 2 suspicious American deaths in his company. He returned to his Klan involvement back home in Oklahoma, which naturally segued into a job with the police department, where he's been on the payroll since 1947. In his notes, Clyde Perry points out that Coyle obsessively completes his own notes and seems to consider himself of vital importance to American history. Further, Coyle was a highly effective policeman within his town and profited greatly from the exploitation of prison labor, extortion, and civil forfeiture. He marries a second time and extorts his wife's family, who later die in an electrical fire. His second wife flees to Chicago, and there she dies of, quote, natural causes. Perry also observes that Coyle has this obsession with standing in open fields during thunderstorms and observing the lightning. At this point, Coyle has been promoted to sergeant within the police force, and his third wife dies via, quote, suicide, multiple gunshot wounds to the head. Despite so much suspicious death surrounding him, Coyle is a standout policeman in his town, beloved by most of its citizens, his coworkers, and has even won numerous commendations for his service to his community. When Clyde Perry finally meets Coyle for a proper interview, Coyle reveals that he knows Perry has been tailing him and takes great offense to it. Within minutes, the interview turns violent, and Coyle brutally beats Perry, with the agent later recalling that he felt Coyle was just playing with him. If he had wanted to kill him, he would have done so easily. He also notes that Coyle's charisma was undeniable and signs off on the recruitment process moving forward. So, how does a man with racist, obsessive, and violent compulsions become so beloved by his community? Writing it off as a product of the times, late 1940s to 1959, would be a disservice, I feel, to the greater intention of the character. It comes back to the aforementioned charisma and the obsession with that trait that Murkoff is looking for within possible prime assets. They want people who can radicalize and control members of a population. To think cult leaders, think politicians, people whom you've heard speak, and there's something so charming and a gravity to them that compels you to agree, to listen what they have to say. That's the charisma that Murkoff is looking for here, and Coyle's already demonstrated it in spades. What I find so fascinating about the writing of Leland Coyle is that this cult of personality Murkoff was searching for has also emerged in the real world fandom of the game, with Leland Coyle being the most popular and beloved of its prime assets by far. All of this sounds so black and white on paper. He's a violent, racist man who regularly exercises brutality to enforce his twisted visions of the law. What's there to love? He should be loathed. He was meant to be loathed, but he isn't. Why? Julian Bailey voices Coyle in the Outlast Trials, and he understood precisely what was needed to make the character come to life the way the writers envisioned him. Coyle's voice is gravelly, coarse, and rough, but it suits him wonderfully. And baked in is the expected accent of an Oklahoma native and the dialect to match, not just the time period, but the region he comes from as well. There is an undeniable humor to the delivery of some of the voice lines, even the most absurd and cruel ones, and this is largely thanks to Bailey's phenomenal work in the booth for the character.
What are you gonna do? Call the police? Don't make sense for a fella to chase a dying animal. You go on and bleed out, honey. Who's interrupting my investigation? Who the fuck? All right. The law is gonna come down on you fucks with a darkness. Promise you that. Truth is like the carnal act of love. It's simply a matter of power. Power you don't got. Sometimes wonder if you're just misbehaving 'cause you like to be punished. Want me to pull on those pigtails?
There's an inherent sexual tension and repression played up by Bailey's performance that mirrors the fetishized image of the law that Coyle has in his mind and physically represents. This desire to control, to dominate, and to oppress drips venomously from Coyle's tongue as he patrols the jail and the courthouse, both of the trial environments he protects from the player characters. But more than just the sexual undertone, there's also a humor and a wit present there that can be outright disarming at times. It's jarring to be hiding in the dark and to hear the man you're hiding from lamenting about how much he would give for a snack of pistachios.
What I wouldn't give for a handful of pistachios.
It's so jarring, in fact, that there are times when I'm going against Coyle that I physically laugh out loud when I hear him say some of the things he does during the trials. I would be doing a disservice to the character if I didn't also mention the homophobia demonstrated in both the trial environments and within Coyle's voice lines themselves. Reagents can see a variety of mannequins and corpses in the trial environments who have been beaten and positioned sexually by Coyle. The evidence of it being his handiwork is, of course, the charred impressions left by his baton or the jumper cables and car batteries at the scene of the crime. The intention here feels like a nod again to Coyle's sexual repression and his desire for dominance, and an overcompensation for the inner insecurity he feels toward both of those things, particularly towards other masculine figures. While there's evidence of his misogyny also present on the bodies of more feminine mannequins, from my observations, the bulk of his physical violence is directed towards male bodies. We see his attempts to quite literally emasculate mannequins and corpses by searing off their genitalia. Combine this with his frequent threats of sexually assaulting reagents if he catches them, and I think the image becomes pretty clear. What's also interesting, though, is that Sergeant Coyle's body language, stance, and appearance invoke images of the iconic sexy cops populating artwork by Tom of Finland. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Tom of Finland's work, he was an internationally regarded artist whose illustrations featured queer men, and his works often sexualized men in pseudo-erotic situations with a noteworthy, albeit consensual, power dynamic between the characters. Coyle's aviator sunglasses, black leather bomber jacket, policeman's cap, and glove all resemble the iconic imagery by Tom of Finland. And his stance, grabbing his groin, is another staple of particularly dominating men, often portrayed in the same illustrations. It's an interesting point of connection, and the similarities are so consistent throughout his portrayal that I feel Coyle's design was influenced by Tom of Finland's work, which may further the point about his overall sexual repression and conflicted emotions about his sexuality. I think it would be reductive to state that Coyle's popularity within the Outlast fandom comes solely from people who have an I can fix him mentality. I genuinely think Coyle is one of the most well written antagonists in video games that we've seen in a considerable amount of time. Not only do his behaviors and history align with realistic outcomes, cause and effect, but from the ground up, he was designed to be liked, despite his position as a character that is objectively worthy of hate. In the game world, he possesses a unique level of charisma that ingratiated him with everyone in his town, the very same people who would have also known about his psychopathic tendencies to some degree. This same charisma allows him to control and keep order within the population of other minor threats in the game, and that's a charge he takes very seriously. On paper, I think it's easy to hate Sergeant Leland Coyle. He's misogynistic, he's racist, he's homophobic, he's violent, and he corrupts the law to suit his own twisted morality. But it's his presence within the game that endears him to the player, his charm, again, that charisma. The writers behind Coyle understood the power of presence. They had to, or else the very concept he's founded upon simply would not have worked. He would have been just like another cookie cutter horror game antagonist that was forgotten amidst thousands of others. His positioning and lines within the game give him a personality beyond the violence we witness and know he's capable of. And this, coupled with Julian Bailey's remarkable performance, brings the character to life in an absurdly unique way that makes it incredibly hard just to hate him. There's something within us that wants to listen for the next absurd line Coyle will deliver, that maybe even wants to understand him. And that is what makes him so dangerous.